He's the director of Zimbabwe's Exiles Forum. Good afternoon, Tino. Always a pleasure having you with us on the SABC News Desk.
Afternoon to you and your viewers.
Tino, you just heard the clip of President Emmerson Mnangagwa there, describing the late president, his predecessor, Robert Mugabe, as a Pan-Africanist of note and indeed a liberation icon on the continent. What do you make of those comments right now, Tino?
Thank you very much for such a beautifully phrased question. But the biggest problem that we have seen with describing Mr. Mugabe is that he cannot be described in one word. So certain fellows, and I think as they've coined a word that, that comes out as a heroic villain. Now, to try and portray Mr. Mugabe as a liberation fighter, as an icon, and you stop there, it's not enough. Because after liberating the people of Zimbabwe, he went on to abuse them. So others have drawn parallels to a father who has got two daughters. And that father sends all the daughters to school, very well so. And after the other daughter has become a doctor, she has graduated from university. He goes on to rape her own daughter. So it's a story of emotion, where the other daughter says, but father, you have raped me. You did send me to school. I have a marriage now, but you have raped me. Then you've got the other daughter says, no, our father did so well. And the village guys around, around that same area where the father is living, they are charmed by the eloquence of the man. And they don't believe that he could do such kind of things. And they clap hands for him. So that is the situation around Mr. Mugabe. His people in Zimbabwe and also Africa as the village in which he is.
And this is indeed, and I'm glad you touched on this, he is indeed such a complex, multifaceted character, personality, but also a very deeply polarizing one in his own country. And it starts to feel that he's left us a very mixed legacy.
Yes, this legacy will continue to be mixed. You will have seen that, over the past week, the talk has been about where we are going to bury the icon. Will it be at the Heroes Acre, or will it be in his village? And Zimbabweans were talking about that for the past 3, 4 days or 5. What we have seen is that Zimbabweans themselves, they have lost confidence in the national shrine being the Heroes Acre. We have also seen that Mr. Mugabe himself, he has also lost confidence in the people that took over after him. And he does not believe that his body must be there. I think we have heard that he's now going to be buried at the Heroes Acre after 30 days. And they are trying to build, I think they call it a mausoleum. Other Zimbabweans call it a museum. Others have gone further to call it a shrine, where they say they want to put his body in there. But how do you then build a shrine for Mr. Mugabe when the people of Zimbabwe are suffering? It's very difficult to apply for a passport. It's very difficult to put food on the table. But they want to spend several amounts of money in building that structure called a mausoleum and keeping his body for the next 30 days. It's not easy to keep a body and, to make sure that you'll bury it again. So there is a lot of confusion within the body legacy of Mr. Mugabe.
All right. With due respect to him, he is seen as a liberator who worked for the economic emancipation for black Zimbabweans. But what in your mind, Tino, should a leader be most remembered for? There were also land invasions, there were rigged elections, and also various numerous human rights violations in the country during his tenure as president.
Look,
for over 40 years.
Look, this is a challenge to every living soul to say that whatever that you do, try as much as possible to please, to be on the right side of time and to be on the right side of humanity. So when we look at Mr. Mugabe's life over the past 37 years, yes, he is a liberator. We can't take that away from him. He liberated our people. He tried to give back land to the black Zimbabweans. But it was not something that was done in the interest of giving land to the Zimbabweans. It was done in the interest of retaining power. So we ended up with a chaotic land redistribution exercise, which did not benefit the majority of Zimbabweans. So what Zimbabweans are now calling for is the redistribution of land. Now land has got to be taken from the black warlords that have got 21 farms like himself, Mr. Mugabe had 21. The other guys in the ZANU-PF leadership have got 7 farms, 10 farms each, 8 farms each. There's never been a conclusive land audit up to now since the year 2002, 2003. So those areas, they really dent his legacy. But above all, we don't want to, we don't want to ignore the positive that he has done. But let's also look at the empty stadium that you saw today. If indeed Mr. Mugabe is that big figure that you want to portray or that the media might want to portray, how big is he and to who has he been so big? Has he not been big to Africa and been smaller in Zimbabwe? So at the end of the day, charity begins at home. It is the people that you live with that are going to mourn you when you are gone. So make sure that in each and every time that you are with them as a leader, you always do your best to make sure that they are happy. As far as Zimbabweans are concerned, they've seen a man that has failed over the past 37 years with a few successes here and there, but on the overall, 70% of his leadership was a failure.
Okay, we're talking about an intellectual great here, luminary. In fact, he graduated from Fort Hare University in Eastern Cape. We all know that, where Tata Madiba attended, Nelson Mandela, Botswana's first president, Seretse Khama, who else went there? Tanzanian President Julius Nyerere, Zambia's first president, Kenneth Kaunda, the list goes on. But something went amiss there. I mean, we're talking about a giant of the liberation movement. And he also spoke about racial unity long before Tata Madiba emerged from prison himself. And he somehow lost his way, Tino. What led to Robert Mugabe's unraveling, do you think? And what were those pivotal bad decisions he made?
When you decided to stay in power longer than you are expected to stay, it becomes a serious problem. So at the end of the day, he started very well by realizing that there was need to unite Zimbabweans. But while he was uniting Zimbabweans, the whites and the native Zimbabweans, he also went on a leash in Matebeleland.
Yes.
You know, the Gukurahundi story, that is well recorded. So those are areas that we see. And if you go back to the old clips from Mr. Mugabe when he was being asked on what he intends to do with Zimbabwe, he said clearly, and I repeat it, that he intends to rule Zimbabwe with firmness. He is a man that never believed that there would be a multi-party democracy in Zimbabwe. That is why you find that as late as 1987, there was the Unity Accord to try and galvanize ZAPU and ZANU-PF to form one party. He is a man who detested competition. So to a certain extent, you would hear the comments from Zimbabweans now that he does not want to be buried at the Heroes Acre because he feels that he will be competing for relevance with other fellow comrades that are lying there. So he is a man who started very well, if we should put it that way, very reconciliatory, very magnanimous in his approach. But when he reached the end of the end of the towards the end of the 90s, the end of the 90s decade, then he all lost it in trying to reserve power. But what is the lesson here? The lesson is Mr. Mugabe should have used his intellect to make sure that he appeals to the morals and to the demands of the people. But unfortunately, as we have seen, intellects are theorists. They have never been able to do anything, unlike engineers who are praised for what they would have done. But orators are praised for what they would have said. And saying and doing are two different things that fall on two different sides of the coin. So
for most of the day, we've heard leader after leader, African leader, commend Mr. Mugabe for his Pan-Africanist ideals. Tino, I mean, this rhetoric of Pan-Africanism, how tangible is this, or does it remain for now a pipe dream in Zimbabwe?
It is a pipe dream.
Did he really live these ideas?
It is a pipe dream. I think you would have seen what happened to Mr. Ramaphosa, the president of South Africa, when he was heckled. What it tells you is that Mr. Ramaphosa, just like all other leaders in Africa, they do not have a proper political thermometer. His political thermometer would have reminded him that the wind in the continent is breaking the borders and making sure that Africa is one. When you are speaking at such a place and to such a high-profile figure, you should have started by apologizing for the acts of xenophobia. But his political thermometer has always been was lost, and he always comes to the party at a later stage. So in a nutshell, it is appreciated that there is a need to be Pan-African, there is a need to speak to Africa as one. But when we have got pockets of xenophobia still happening in this day and age, when this thing of Pan-Africanism was started by Kwame Nkrumah and the other guys in the 1950s, it means that there's been so much talk, but there's been so much less action. Yes. Why is it that in SADC here we do not have, a single currency, single economy, if indeed there was Pan-Africanism being preached by Mr. Mugabe?
Tino, do you firmly believe that had Mr. Mugabe retired when he was supposed to, that this would have greatly altered the trajectory for Zimbabwe?
Let me give you an example here. If Mr. Mugabe died in 1990, it was going to be chaos in Harare. It was going to be chaos in Zimbabwe. It was going to be chaos all over the world. Because at that time, he had reached his prime. Understand? But because he died after having stayed so much in power, his death does not carry the weight that it would have carried 20 years ago. So unfortunately to him, if he had retired maybe 10 years or 15 years down the line, he would have gone much greater than Mr. Nelson Mandela. Because Mr. Nelson Mandela only came out of prison in 1993, 94 there. He took office for 5 years and then he left. If we have got to look at what each particular individual did for Africa between the two, you would find that Mr. Mugabe has done much, much greater work for the continent and the people of Zimbabwe. But the problem is he overstayed and he responded by abusing the people, unleashing army, unleashing thugs to beat ordinary citizens. And there you have it. The stadium was empty today.
All right, we are running out of time. How hopeful can we be, Tino, that the new dispensation that's now running for about 2 years, that this will bring a tangible change to ordinary Zimbabweans on the ground, to the people who need it the most? Or is this just more corruption with new faces of cronyism?
Where is the dispensation that you are talking about?
The new president, I mean.
Is he new?
Mnangagwa's administration.
He's the old enforcer of the dispensation that has not changed. There is no new dispensation in Zimbabwe. What the people of Zimbabwe are asking right now is, in this government, which is so corrupt, which is unable to feed, how much alcohol is in their blood? Understand? That is the question. Are they really drunk? Are they here to perform? There is no semblance of a new dispensation in Zimbabwe. That is why they are fighting as to where Mr. Mugabe is going to be buried. Because these are criminals who are using political funerals for political capital.
Tino, I'm afraid we'll have to leave it there. This is Mr. Tino Mambeu joining us on the SABC News Desk. Thank you so much for your time at the News Desk. Time to take a short break. I'll be back with more news after this.